Hello and welcome to the video. Hello, I'm up here. Hello. This is Darren. For those of you that don't know who Darren is one of the very active developers, one of the people behind INAV. So a massive thank you to Darren and the rest of the team for giving us the new version that is now just out, INAV 5.0. So Darren and I were talking about this and we thought, wouldn't it be a fun idea for us to kind of run through our favorite things that have changed in INAV 5.0 from the previous version 4.1 and kind of run through it, and hopefully it will give you an insight into why you might want to upgrade to 5.0 as well. Now, Darren has his own YouTube channel. I'm going to put a link down below. Go and check that out. If you're an INAV pilot and into radio control, create some great content. I'm not just saying that because he's here. He actually does. And also, he is one of the regular people on the INAV the checks in the post, the INAV Fixed Wing group. So if you are part of the INAV Fixed Wing group and you also listen to that podcast, you'll know who this gentleman is. Again, if you don't, then go and check that out. If you're flying fixed wings with INAV, there's a lot of great information in there. So we are going to go through this at a pretty high level, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Darren?
Yeah, definitely. This is just sort of an overview of what's coming, what's changed, what we are excited about. As Lee said, it's quite small changes, but sort of tidying things up in a lot of ways. So it just improves the overall package.
And that's probably worthwhile talking about as job number one. I'll put time codes to all these things down below so you can kind of navigate to something interesting. First thing is that we've just done a major jump from 4.1 to 5.0. Now, in normal software land, going from a Windows version from a version 10 to 11, or from an iOS version or your favorite app, usually means everything has changed. It is a major release. Minor releases tend to be the 0.1, 0.2, whatever. We've just done a major jump. Now, the stuff we're about to talk about, you could probably argue that it isn't a major jump, but there's a very particular reason why INAV now has gone from 3.0 to 4 to 5, isn't there? And there's a whole rationale behind it.
3.0 actually was probably the last one to change because of features. It had a lot of new fixed wing features in with the new auto tune, that sort of thing. And then 4.0 was the start of this new sort of versioning system. And the reason is INAV now uses a system called Semver. I believe it used it before, to be honest, but it just wasn't stuck to strictly. So now we're sort of sticking to it strictly. And basically that defines how a version number is incremented. So as Lee sort of pointed out, there's three parts to a version number. There's the major version, which in this case is 5. Actually, I should probably use 4.1. It'd be easier to explain. So the major version will be 4. Then you have a minor version, which is the 1. And then you have a bug release, which is the 0. So if something changes that breaks compatibility, you will increase the major version. And that's what's happened with the 4.1 to 5. If you have something that changes quite a bit of code, but the compatibility with the previous version is still there, you change the minor release. And if it's just a quick bug fix, you change the bug fix release. So we did almost see an INAV, I think 4.1.1, but it just all went into the new 5. So that's why the jump.
So this is quite common. It's more common than you may think if you are using things like the ELRS, things like OpenTX, EdgeTX, all use the same kind of ideas now. A major version usually means it's a compatibility related issue. And a lot of that, weirdly, is driven around things like fonts in stuff like INAV, but we'll come on to that. So the first thing to talk about is something that I've actually had, which is an error that you occasionally get. You go to ARMIT and on the OSD, you get something around LPF or gyro hardware LPF is out of range. And when you go and check your configurator, it's weirdly set to a value that it shouldn't be, and you have to set it back in order to fly. Now, this is fixed, isn't it?
It's only something we've started seeing quite recently, but it's been identified that it's an MSP version detection problem. So it does affect things like configurator and SpeedyB. And when you make a change, sometimes it doesn't know the version, so it writes invalid data to the flight controller, basically. This is now fixed. So going forward from 5.0, you won't see this bug again.
I would recommend anyone watching this, when you have set your INAV plane up and it's all tickety-boo and you're happy, I would do a diff all and a dump and save it somewhere safe. And then if in the future you plug it in and something horrible happens, I've not had it happen yet, but I am starting to back up my setups when I've got the tune and everything all tickety-boo. The next thing that I'm quite excited about is that Configurator is getting quite a big overhaul. Lots of things have moved around, and some of the things that we've been expecting in one particular place since, well, INAV was a twinkle in Constantine's eye, have now moved. So we're going to have to relearn a couple of the things around, but you've also taken a chance to kind of fix some of the stuff that's kind of legacy in Configurator as well.
Yeah, the configurators had a few areas sort of overhauled, but it's one thing I absolutely hate with some of these configurators is they move stuff and don't tell you where it is. So one thing I made sure to ask Pavel for was release notes for all the moves, but Lee and I will tell you now, just so that you know. So if you go to the configuration page, there's 3 things that used to be there but aren't anymore. So the first one is the 3D motors. If you use a 3D quad or a rover, they're now in the outputs page. There's a little toggle. If you slide that over, you get the options back. The other thing that used to be on configuration is the GPS settings. These are now in the GPS page, which, to be honest, they should have been there in the first place. But
it's so obvious now you've done it, isn't it? Of course, it should be in there. I have all the GPS stuff in one place. I'm very happy about that one personally. Thank you.
Yeah, I still get it wrong. I've been using 5.0 configurator for months now, and still get it wrong. But the last one is the craft name. That's no longer on the configuration page. That's now on the OSD page. And the reason for that is because it now lengthens and shortens the field on the OSD preview so you can position it exactly. You don't need to use like spaces before the name anymore if you want to center it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, because there's also the new font selection tool in the on-screen display. We've got things like the mixer actually shows the correct output numbers for the airplane stuff. Logic conditions have changed and look an awful lot neater than they did in previous versions. I'm probably going to end up doing a whole video on the whole logic conditions because it's becoming more and more important as the place to go to do funky stuff like in OpenTX these days for INAV. And also the last one, which is really worthwhile talking about, is the clicking on the help icons actually takes you to the help settings document, which is fantastic because I think lots of us will find stuff in Configurator and we'll have that, what is that? And at the moment, there's that little question mark that you can hover over and you get a small paragraph of what it is. Now it'll actually take you to where that stuff is in the documentation. And actually, while we're talking about that, I would always recommend, and we were talking about this before we started recording, the place to go if you want to understand how INAV works isn't little videos like this. This is kind of handy just to give you an overview of what's changed. Go and have a look at the GitHub documentation. Definitely go and have a look at the INAV fixed-wing group documentation. And all of the things are kind of explained in there because you tend to find that in lots of places like GitHub, it's quite dry in terms of what has changed. In terms of what the benefit is to you as a pilot is easier in other places. So the next one we're going to talk about then is the mixer. We kind of mentioned it a little bit, but it's worthwhile delving a little bit more into that because the mixer has been overhauled.
Yeah, there's quite a lot been done to the mixer, and hopefully this will make it a lot better for you guys. Now, I'm not really a quad pilot, but for those of you who do fly quads, the first thing is the motor direction is now a toggle in the mixer. Now, just to clarify, it doesn't actually reverse the motors for you. You still need to do that in BL Heli, but it does actually tell INAV that you're using reverse motors and also will change the image to show the correct direction for the props to be spinning. So that's pretty handy for getting your props on correctly. Likewise, with the fixed wing side, that whole preview image is completely changed too. Starting when you load a new mixer, you'll see that image is completely blank, and it won't be until you load and apply a mixer that it actually fills anything in. And that's because when you choose your mixer settings down the bottom, you have a column for servo numbers. Now, these numbers originally sort of related to a table just above it, which converted it to output numbers. And then above it, it used to be a static image, which just had some sort of default output numbers, which didn't work for everything. So the servo numbers converted to the output numbers are now shown on the image. So the actual numbers on the image are the correct output ports on your flight controller you should use for that mix and motor. Also, the bit down the bottom is color coded to match the preview image. So everything should be a lot more straightforward. There's a lot of little other things, but they're the main things to look out for in the mixer.
So basically what it means is that static image at the top, that once you started playing with the mixer order, bore no resemblance to how you needed to wire it up, is actually, it now does. I think it wasn't it you and I that had this idea probably 6-8 months ago? We were having a chat and I said, wouldn't it be good if you have, and you were like, you know what, we could do that. And it's really fun to see this stuff come along. Oh, by the way, I've just dropped in another one about dynamic on-screen displays. I don't know if you've seen that as an enhancement suggestion.
I have.
All right, okay. Maybe INAV 7. But so lots and lots of change. And again, none of these are probably things that are going to rock your world if you're already an INAV user. But if you are coming into INAV, it makes a lot more sense and it's much less confusing. Next thing to talk about, configurator units.
But yeah, so units is something that was introduced, I think, in 4.0. It may have been 3.0. Can't really remember. But it's received a few tweaks, a few more conversions, and it now applies to basically all pages that I could get it to apply to. The only area that probably doesn't really use it at the moment is mission control. But everywhere else where there's a unit that can be changed, it will do. In the initial release, I'm going to say 4.0, there was a bit of confusion because there were two labels. There was the unit label on the input, and then on the text label there was a label or a unit on there as well. They're all gone now. Just the input label remains, which will change depending on which units you've selected. There's also conversions for Fahrenheit to centigrade now. So if you're in America, you can use temperature as you like. So yeah, there's a lot more changes. There was a bug in it for rounding, which has been fixed. So it's just improved all round, to be honest.
I'm very happy about this one because I fly in feet, but for things like the return to home distance, historically, even though you had the feet, the UK unit set, you still had to set the return to home height in meters, and yeah, it just, you kind of had to do that. Like 400 feet's about 110 meters. You had to do that kind of fag packet calculation in the back of your head. So yeah, so happy that that's all done. So thank you for that.
And you can set it to actually just use the units on your OSD as well. So you can choose specific metric, imperial, or default. Or you can choose OSD, so whatever you've got on your OSD, it will use. Even if you're using GA, it will do stuff in knots and nautical miles, so it's all there.
General improvements, let's do those very quickly, because there's quite a few things in this list. So SmartAudio is for Crossfire, 69, IRC Tramp. SmartAudio looks like it's been tweaked, hasn't it?
Yeah, there was an issue using it with the Crossfire 69, so there's a fix been put in. If you look in the documents on GitHub, there's a new document called vtx.md, which has different settings you can go to try and get SmartAudio working if it's not working. Immersion RC Tramp has been added to the new Maytech 1G3 SE, which is the 1.3 gigahertz VTX. So you can change power levels on channels on that now, and how to set that up is in that document too. So yeah, there's a few little changes to get more compatibility, but also the document so that you can look up how to change it.
So if you're struggling, that's the place to go. We'll put links in the description to that one so you can have a look. uBlocks 10 is supported, so the latest and biggest generation of GPSs, which is a nice feature. And then there's also quite a few new connections for Configurator as well, isn't there, rather than just this couple we've had.
Yeah, I've not actually played about with this yet, but you can basically now, rather than just using your USB cable, you could use a Bluetooth adapter to connect. Or a Bluetooth low energy adapter, I should say. Also, you could use Wi-Fi. So there's the Maytech F405
WTE, is it?
WTE, that's the one. Yeah. So many acronyms.
It's all just changed recently.
Yeah, which is a new flight controller. It has actually got a Wi-Fi chip on board, so you can use that to connect to Configurator. And Samsung actually put a demo of that working up. So, yeah, it just gives you more options. Yeah. And less USB means probably less chance of configuration wipe if it is by power surges.
It also means that potentially, depending on the range of the Wi-Fi, it just like I say, it gives you options, doesn't it? So going back, we mentioned OSD briefly before about there being a new font and some changes and some stuff like that. The OSD itself has had quite a few other updates for those people who are using very, very big batteries. Let's talk about that one first.
Yeah. So, but the problem was INAV would get to 999, 9999, and then stop. That would be it. It would increment, but it would just be the wrong value. It would miss off the end digit. So this is now supported properly. So there's two ways of doing it. You can either leave it as is, and it will just add a decimal point and change the value to amp hours. So it's basically reading the same as what you saw before, but it's just displayed correctly. Or you can actually specify between 4 and 6 digits for the milliamp hours. So 6 digits, we're never going to run out. Not in a million years.
Never say never. Not with us pilots out here. You know, someone will do it. Radars. So INAV radar ESP32 has lots of improvements and fixes. The other big one I'm excited about, we now have the ability to have switch position indicators on the on-screen display, so you can actually see if a switch has engaged or not. I tend to use a lot of audio announcements in things like Open and Edge TX, but it gives you an option if you don't want, for everyone to hear what you're doing. You can just have it on the screen. But the last one that will probably bring us into our last selection of things is you've added in-flight adjustment for fixed wing level, which I am over the moon about. This is something that we've needed for ages. Can you talk about what causing that and why that was needed?
Well, originally we used to sort of adjust for angle of attack using our board pitch alignment, which
it worked.
It worked, but it wasn't the most simple thing. If you rotate the flight controller 90 degrees, you now have to use roll.
Yeah.
You don't know where, by default orientation, negative is up and positive is down. So this just simplifies everything. So there's now a fixed wing level trim, which was in INAV 4.0. It might have even been in 3.0. But positive is always up, negative is always down. And there's the auto level mode in flight. So it will automatically adjust it and get it pretty good. Yeah. What the in-flight adjustment allows you to do is just tweak this. So if you find that it is still just slightly losing or gaining altitude, you can just tweak it. Say, for example, you're on a cruise, you change your cruise throttle slightly, that would have an effect. So you can just tweak the altitude rather than having to do the auto mode again.
That's exactly why I'm excited about this, because normally you set it up for what you think your cruise throttle is going to be, and you do your best. You try and set it on a really calm day without any wind, and then you go out and there's a little bit of wind, maybe the cruise throttle's slightly different, the angle of attack is slightly different, and you find that what was brilliant when you flew 2 days ago, when you're flying along, you're actually losing a little bit of altitude. This allows you to just add an extra 0.02, 0.04, whatever you need degrees, just to kind of push that nose up in that case and just get it level. And it's such a nice thing to be able to do, rather than, oh, all right, I need to remember what my auto trim button is and you can just kind of tweak it in. And that leads us on to the last bit for our conversation tonight. There have been a lot of improvements for fixed wing pilots. There've been lots of improvements in 5.0 across the board. There's been, as usual, shed loads of code fixes, loads of bug fixes, loads of things for quads, but it's the stuff that's for fixed wing that's really caught my eye. And talking about in-flight trim level adjustment, which is hard to say, then it's a nice segue. So do you want to talk about some of the other cool things that you guys have improved for fixed wing?
Yeah, sure. So auto launch, you can now abort this if you've got a throttle position between the low position and idle throttle. So if you decide that you don't want it to launch, you can just waggle the sticks and it will cancel. It's still quite safe because obviously you're expecting your idle throttle to kick in. So if the throttle is within that position, you're sort of expecting it anyway, so you can just lower the throttle down. The other thing with auto launch is you can now abort it using the sticks if you're using auto launch on a switch. Now, this is something I didn't really realize, even though I use it on a switch, but you couldn't actually abort it using the sticks. If you enabled it on the switch, you had to use the switch to abort it. But now you can use both the switches or both the sticks for permanently enabled and switched auto launch.
Fantastic, because I use it the other way around. I have auto launch permanently enabled, so as soon as I arm, she is immediately ready to be thrown into the air. I've never used it on a switch, so I've never actually seen that. So that's good to know. For those of you that like auto launch on a switch, it's now safer. You can cancel out of it.
Yeah. Just another quick one while we're talking about auto launch. If you do use idle throttle, and you like the idle throttle delay, which I think is awesome, you can now set it up in Configurator. It's on the launch settings in advanced tuning.
Fab. Yeah, every time there's an update, there seems to be more in that advanced tuning tab about auto launch and other places. It's getting less CLI needed, which is I'm a fan of. One that we probably don't have time to get into a lot of the weeds about here, but the way that missions work, INAV missions where you can fly autonomously, you load a mission into memory and it then flies that mission on its own, so you can go along for the ride. Lots of new changes for that as well. We could probably do an entire 20-minute video just on the changes on that. So we'll probably you'll probably have a video from me and a video from Darren at some point about the new mission stuff. Go and check out my other previous mission video for how it used to look. It's still not the same level as the kind of mission capability that you have in things like RD Pilot, where, you can draw a polygon on the screen and then ask it to fill in the polygon with a flight path to provide, aerial photography. That's not where it is, but it's getting better every single time, and there's quite a few changes. Again, a link's down below to those, but be aware that if you are a regular mission flyer in INAV, it's definitely worthwhile checking out the release notes because there are a couple of little changes. The other one that I'm excited about is landing detection on fixed wing. I can't believe it's taken us this long to have landing detection on fixed wing.
No, and I actually looked through the code, and there is actually a check now to see if it thinks it's flying, which is awesome because that opens up a hell of a lot of stuff too. So if you get stuck in a tree, it might not work, but it basically it checks your vertical and horizontal velocity. So if your vertical speed is less than, I think it's 1.7 kilometers an hour, your horizontal speed is less than 3.6 kilometers an hour. Your actual rotation is below a threshold and the absolute movement is below a threshold, it decides that you've landed. So it will automatically disarm. So yeah, that's a great new feature.
It's something interesting that things like RD Plane have had for a while, because when you land, it says something like landing something complete is the Yahoo script on the radio tells you when you've landed. It's like, oh, thanks very much. But actually logically it does allow you to do some smart stuff if the plane knows the difference between I'm flying and I'm not. So hopefully that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. These are, again, Darren's and I's kind of cherry-picked some of the highlights from all the changes from 5.0. Hopefully from this list you can see that there isn't any big stuff, like we haven't suddenly got VTOL in 5.0. None of that's here. But what we have got is lots and lots of really cool incremental changes. So thank you very much, Darren, for putting aside a bit of time tonight to have a chat and to help put this list together of our favourite stuff. Again, all of the links are down below for things like Darren's YouTube channel, the INAV Fixed Wing group, and the link to the GitHub, which has all the information. There is so much more that's gone into 5.0 than we could possibly cover in 20 minutes. This is literally just the highlights. So, Darren, thank you very much again, and good luck to everyone who aren't with 5.0. I'm going to fire up Configurator and start upgrading. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organized into easy to follow playlists that if you're trying to learn a topic will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.